But what we're experiencing is randomly reinforced behavior. It's like playing a slot machine in Vegas.
Yeah,
every so often you're going to get that win. And for people who look at TikTok videos, right, every so often something's going to come along that's just hilarious. And you might have a lot of duds, right, things that just don't move you.
Yeah.
But you've experienced in the past something hilarious. So
That's the knowing,
Yeah, so you're going to stick with it. Hi, I'm Gloria Mark. I'm a professor at University of California, Irvine. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about our attention spans with our devices when we use our computers and phones. And we're going to be talking about the science of multitasking, interruptions, distractions, why we experience these things, and what we can do about it.
Well, here we are. Dr. Gloria Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Your work, your study, your expertise is something that I've talked about on the show before, but is of constant reminder of how important it is, whether I'm on the podcast or just in daily life, and that's attention span, our focus, the lie that is multitasking, and all of these, I forget exactly where I first heard this, but weapons of mass distraction.
Yes.
All that to say, that's what you are here to kind of help us better understand and even debunk some myths about focus and attention span and why it's so difficult these days to really hone in on what we want to hone in on. So please introduce yourself. What is your area of expertise? And high level, what can you say about your new work?
Right. So I'm a professor at University of California, Irvine. I study what's called human-computer interaction. And the way you can think about it is our relationship with our devices. And it's actually quite an old field. It's been around since the 1980s. And it's since expanded. It covers social media. It covers AI. I mean, there's, technology has expanded to such an extent and permeates our lives so much that, this field has really grown in importance. So I've been studying human-computer interaction for a very long time, and I became interested specifically in studying attention and multitasking and distraction and interruptions from the early aughts when I moved to the U.S. I moved back to the U.S. from Germany. I'd been living in Germany for 9 years, and that's when I first started becoming acquainted with a range of technological innovations because I worked for a German research
You probably
institute.
had a leg up. German technology is pretty clean,
Yeah.
pretty advanced.
This was very advanced kinds of technology. But my life as a researcher at the time was very different in the sense that I really had the luxury to be able to focus on one project. And I had other people who would write grants and who would I didn't have to serve on committees or mentor students or teach. And then I moved back to the U.S. and became a professor. And all of a sudden, I was faced with having to deal with so many different kinds of activities, teaching, research, applying for grants, and so on. But I also noticed how I was becoming increasingly more glued to my screen. And I could, I was just tethered to my computer. And, for example, I would go off for lunch and I would come back and eat right in front of my desk, and all my colleagues were doing the same. And but I also noticed at the same time that it was becoming increasingly harder for me to focus on what was on that screen. And I noticed how I kept flipping screens quite a bit. And I began to talk to people, and they were experiencing the same thing. So being a scientist, I thought I would like to study this phenomenon empirically and see to what extent, is this a widespread thing? Do other people experience this? That's how I got into this.
I wonder if we were in Germany around the same time. I was in Garmisch-Partenkirchen for a couple months, way down southwest, back in like 2004, 2005.
No, I came back in 2000 to the U.S.
Germany's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. Berlin is awesome.
I have not been. I can't get distracted on a travel bug right now. I will go down that rabbit hole.
Berlin is
I want to be
so
a wanderlust
wonderful.
nomad so bad. But a couple of things stood out immediately to me from your work that I would love for you to kind of like unpack for us. First of all, you have these three kind of main sections when we're talking about attention span. It's the anatomy of attention, the underlying forces of distraction, and then finally focus, rhythm, and balance. So I interpreted that as, hey, here's really what attention is. Let's dissect it. Let's look at it. And then let's understand what is taking away from that. And then tools and tactics and ways that we can kind of remedy that. So before we kind of get into that, the infrastructure, I want to bring something, being a health coach at heart and this being a very health and wellness centered show. You mentioned that the science consistently shows that multitasking causes stress. Our blood pressure rises, heart rate increases, and this matches our own perceptions that we feel more stressed. So it's kind of like the thing is making us stressed out, and then we have it in our head that we're stressed, and it's just exacerbating the problem.
Yes.
Can you expand on that for us, please? What's going on in that relationship?
So I can give you an analogy of what's going on when we multitask. So imagine whatever activity you're doing, you have an internal representation of that activity. So let's say I'm writing an article. I've got the information that I want to write about. I've got the structure of that article in my mind. I have certain facts that I want to make sure I get down in that article. So all of that constitutes a representation of that activity.
Okay.
Then I suddenly switch and I look at email. And all of a sudden I have a different representation of email. So I might scan it to look for important emails that I want to take care of. I might be looking for a particular email to see if it's come in. I might be looking to try to just delete what I can.
Quick dopamine rush. I'm guilty of that. Things that I will keep on mailing lists just because I know I can delete, and it feels good, right?
It feels
things that
really
I should unsubscribe from, probably months, years ago.
Yeah.
But it's just like delete, feels good.
I also feel overwhelmed like many people do. So you're switching, not only are you switching activities, but you're switching your internal representation. And so the analogy that I like to use is that when you work on an activity, you're writing on an internal whiteboard. And then you erase it really quick and you switch your attention to something else and you rewrite on that whiteboard.
Oh, yeah.
Then you erase it and then you switch back or you switch to something else. And as we switch activities, we keep writing and erasing and rewriting. And this is getting us exhausted. And this is what's causing stress.
Mentally exhausted.
Mentally exhausted, yes. And let me just clear up a misconception about multitasking because a lot of people think, I can do two things at the same time. Well, if two things are effortful and they involve what's called controlled information processing, and I'll explain what I mean by that, you can't do these two things at the same time. So I cannot be in a Zoom meeting paying attention and checking my email at the same time.
Hear that, everybody? Listen up. She just called your bluff, especially the last couple of years.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, so many people do it, but that's just one example. What we're actually doing is we're switching our attention back and forth very rapidly. So, you're trying to pay attention to the speaker on Zoom, and then you're trying to scan your emails. Maybe you're trying to type an email. You're switching your attention. And what we found in a typical workday for knowledge workers, and these are people whose main activity is dealing with information, and typically it's digital information in this age, people don't just switch between two different activities, but they're switching among multiple activities.
Oh,
Right.
how many tabs do we keep open on our computers, browsers,
For example.
applications, programs? Yeah.
I mean, we found in our research that people average working on about 12 different projects at the same time. And that's actually about right for me. You know, over the years, I've counted my projects. It's about 11 different projects. And, you know, project is not just, let's say writing a paper, but for me, it could be teaching, it could be writing a grant, it could be preparing something for a committee, even personal life.
Yeah, really. Anything that's in the fore or background of our lives that requires some kind of consistent devotion and development, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So if two things are effortful and involve controlled information processing, that means that you really have to put in mental effort to keep track of what's going on. We cannot do two things at the same time. We cannot parallel process.
Not do them well or to the best of their ability and ours, most likely. Yeah.
Right. But literally, I mean, if you really break it down, if you really were going to measure someone, they're not actually literally doing two things at the same time. However, if one of those activities involves automatic processing.
What would be an example of that?
Automatic reading is an
Okay.
automatic processing.
We can just
walking.
sit and do it. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
You can walk and text because walking is automatic, right?
But should we, though? But should we?
But as soon as that bicyclist comes and clips you, then, of course, your attention is not where it should be. So as long as one of those activities is not effortful, then you can do two things at the same time, right?
For me, multitasking, I've said this before, was the biggest lie I was telling myself. Maybe it was just because it came out of necessity. And I think a period in my life when I was multitasking the most was end of 2017, early 2018, when I left my former career to step out onto my own. And I had to be everything, and I had to check the email, had to do the sales call, had to do the marketing, had to do the posting, had to do the recording, all the things. I'm not alone in this. And so I feel like it's kind of sometimes, like I said, out of necessity. And I'm curious if you agree with this or not. We need it in order to actually have that momentum towards our goals or towards just daily living. But when should we or when can we really have an honest look and go, all right, I don't need it in the way that I think that I do. And actually, if I stop multitasking and more single focused tasking, I could maybe get there faster or get there better.
I'm not sure that we need to do multitasking in the sense of switching our attention between two effortful activities. I think we can accomplish more if we do work sequentially.
I know this now.
You finish
I know
one
this
task
now.
and then you switch. It turns out people have different preferences. So there is a scale that you can take a survey and find out if you tend to score more monochronic, which is working one task at a time, or if you tend to score polychronic, which means switching among different tasks, juggling
and being
different
efficient
tasks.
in them all
And being efficient.
to some standard.
And so some people thrive on this, but it's very few people. Very few people do. Most of us are monotaskers. I know I am. But the hard reality is that we live in a world that puts demands on us, which causes us to multitask. Because let's say you're in a workplace, you might have to field calls, or you might have to keep up with Slack messages. And you might be expecting results from your colleagues. Let's say you're really tightly coupled in a team, which means you're passing results back and forth. Then you have to keep on top of the communications. So we've got monochronic people, monotaskers or monotasker
Which
preference.
I wholeheartedly have learned that is me, as much as I might have fought it up to this point. Yeah.
We have been dropped into a polychronic world, and it's like fitting a square peg in a round hole. And so and that also causes stress because people are doing things that's against their preference and against what's really natural for them to do.
What are your thoughts on male versus female in that situation? I believe, and she would say as well, my wife is a great multitasker, or I should say way better than I am. And in my experience, I think women tend to be better multitaskers than men, or they can just juggle more balls than guys can, although we might like to say otherwise. But any thoughts on that? Is there any science or truth there?
Well, that's a huge oversimplification to say all women are better, but
yeah, it's a poor generalization.
Let me explain one thing. We did look at gender differences in terms of self-interrupting. Self-interrupting is when you're working on a task, there's no observable external stimulus, but suddenly you stop what you're doing and you turn and do something else.
It's me.
And yeah, and it's me, and it's so many people. You're suddenly
it's like the ADD kicks in or something, or like an idea, or like, oh, I should do this, I should do that, and you just do it.
It's an urge, it's a memory, it's something that just drives you to stop what you're doing and check something else. Women self-interrupt fewer times than men.
Okay.
On average.
Okay.
And if you've interrupted, whether you're interrupted by something external or internal from yourself, women are actually faster to resume the interrupted task than men.
So they can like task orient, get back to the task at hand faster.
Yes. Now,
I believe that.
Now, if I talk about this to people, I often get responses, well, of course, from an evolutionary perspective, the women were the gatherers and hunter-gatherers. Now, we don't know that really was the woman's role.
Yeah, we don't have any journals or YouTube videos of a day in the life of a hunter-gatherer, But also I would imagine, having to monitor multiple children or looking after the herd.
Exactly.
So to speak.
You're looking out for predators and you're on guard. You're looking out for danger signals in the environment. So we don't know if there is an evolutionary basis. I have my own theory why that's the case.
What's that?
And that's really based in our modern world. So there's two reasons. The first is, if you have children, it's usually the woman that gets called when the child is sick or if there's some issue and then you have to leave early to pick up the child. And so time is finite during the day.
Okay.
And so you're trying to stay on top of things to make sure you don't work overtime.
Okay.
But another reason, and this is, I talked with a lot of women about this, to be perceived at an even playing field, you have to perform above and beyond your male counterparts. So that, this is my personal theory. I always love to hear what other people think.
Well, obviously, you're also a woman. So, I'm sure your professional training and education coupled with your real life experience is a great interpretation of this as well. Unfortunately, that's the case, I think in a lot of instances, but hopefully we're getting better. That would be amazing, that, we can all strive for the same playing field and, our intent is matched with perception as well. Fascinating. I want to dive into another point. Another note that I made was about our perception with focus. And you talk about how the perception that it is hard to focus when using our personal devices is actually backed up by science. So this is where I was reading and I was like, yes, a pet peeve of mine. And when I look at people just in my home or out in public is just everybody is not paying attention. Their focus is on their phone when it should be, like you were saying earlier, walking across the street and making sure they're not going to get hit by a bike or a bus or something. But you say that we actually have science now to kind of show what is going on when we're under attention span fight. You say that our attention spans while on our computers and smartphones have become short, crazily short, in fact, as we now spend about 47 seconds on any screen on average. Elaborate on that, please. What's going on there?
Yeah, it's really crazy. So I first started studying this back in 2004 with my graduate student, Victor Gonzalez. And, we were determined to measure attention spans empirically. So sometimes, some people ask for people to self-report what your attention span is. How can you possibly do that?
I don't know. I wasn't paying attention.
there's so many memory biases.
Yeah.
It just
or
doesn't
you would
make
lie.
sense.
It's like, oh yeah, I was
Exactly.
doing 5 things. I did them so well. Absolutely.
So when we first started doing this is before sensors and computer logging was really well developed. We would follow people with stopwatches, which was really crazy. And we would time every single activity they did, including the time they spent on the screen, when they switched screens.
Wow. Just in daily life, just watching them.
In the workplace.
In the workplace, okay.
So we focused on people in the workplace. And so, you can imagine how labor intensive that was. And when we first started doing this, we found out that people averaged about 2.5 minutes on any screen before switching. And that was mind-blowing at the time.
So meaning like the longest they would be focusing on a screen, on a task really, is 2.5 minutes before switching?
The average. The average
okay.
length.
Okay.
So the way to think about it is there's high season and low season, depending on what high and low means for you. But sometimes you spend much longer on a screen, but other times your attention is shifting really fast. So it's the average length.
Okay.
And so, since then, I've been tracking average attention duration on a screen with knowledge workers. I've also done this with college students. And we've done this over the years, and we find in the last 5 years, and this is using computer logging techniques, which are much less labor intensive than following people with stopwatches.
You're referring to like there are apps and programs that kind of track in the background.
Exactly.
Screen toggling, task toggling, app toggling.
They can track everything.
Yeah.
And I want to point out that all of this work is approved by the Human Subjects Review Board.
Oh, wow,
so
okay.
people are aware and they sign on, and that, we're not, we take people's privacy very, very seriously. So
Not hired by people's bosses to prove if they're working
not.
or not. Right?
No, I would never, ever reveal anything to a person's
That would be honestly some
manager.
surprisingly scary data, I'm sure.
Yeah. So we found in the last 5 years or so that people's average duration of attention was 47 seconds on any screen before switching. And, we talked about self-interruptions and external interruptions. Irrespective of whether you're interrupted by something else or by your own volition, you switch, comes to about 47 seconds. It's not just my work. It's been replicated by other people as well. And I like to have things replicated. It's really important.
It's good science.
Yeah, and it ranges around that time. My graduate student Fatma Akbar, for her dissertation, studied 50 knowledge workers over 30 days using computer logging and found their average duration 44 seconds, which is roughly the same as 47 seconds. Now, when we look at the median is 40 seconds. So what does the median mean? The median is the value.
Direct middle, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right in the middle.
I'm digging deep for my stats class. Yeah, I can't believe I remember that.
but it's important because, I guess a really nice way to explain the difference between median and average is in Seattle, the average income, because of Bill Gates, it's pretty high.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
But the median income...
Talk about an outlier. Yeah.
The median income is much more reasonable. So the median is 40 seconds. And what we mean when we look at the median, it means half of all of our observations fell below 40 seconds of duration and attention, and half fell above.
Wow.
So people's days... when they're doing knowledge work, it's typically, you're switching your attention among screens, and you're not spending a very long amount of time on any screen.
I have a theory about this, just from observation, but also my homie, shout out Luisa Nicola, a neurologist out of New York, and I think I've even seen Dr. Andrew Huberman touch on this. I think that it's because we have so many more ways now, consistent ways throughout the day, because of really smartphones, to get dopamine hits. We can see something that we visually like or we emotionally connect with, and then it goes away. As fast as it comes on, it goes away. And then as we continue to go through, usually in a scroll, it's like high, high, low, 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 high, low, low, high, high. And so I think when there are consecutive enough lows, meaning something doesn't trigger that dopamine hit, that positive feedback loop, we quickly put it away. And I watch this with people, friends, family, and it's so interesting to me. I would love to get your input on this. Mm-hmm. We're sitting here, we're scrolling, and it's like when the dopamine hits stop coming, it's only then do we realize how lost we've gotten in the device, in mindlessly scrolling. And then I see such a quick, I put it down. Only then do we realize, wow, I've been scrolling for 5 minutes, 20 minutes, or, oh, I'm walking, or, oh, I'm with other people. What's going on there? Am I on the right path with, the dopamine hit, the dopamine loss? And then does that cause us to actually snap back into reality to realize I've been duped by my own attention span? So
it might for some people, but what we're experiencing is randomly reinforced behavior. It's like playing a slot machine in Vegas.
Yeah,
every so often you're going to get that win. And for people who look at TikTok videos, right, every so often something's going to come along that's just hilarious. Mm-hmm. And you might have a lot of duds, right, things that just don't move you.
Yeah.
But you've experienced in the past something hilarious. So
that's the knowing, yeah.
Yeah, so you're going to stick with it. So, if you're lucky enough to be able to put your phone down because you have this lull of not seeing hilarious videos, that's great. But the behavior is so deeply conditioned in us. It's a very difficult thing to do.
That's something that this year for me has been, I guess you would call it a personal goal, or I didn't know that I wanted it to be a goal when I started this year, but it's something I can say that I've consciously changed the most this year. And that is to, as often as possible, not succumb to this device, as powerful as it is. And I get crap all the time from friends and family and people like, you use your phone for your work and it's like you're on your phone all the time. That's perception, but that's by choice. I go on, I do my thing, I create, I engage, I do the work, and then I put it aside. And then for me to become a consumer, to relax, to get a couple dopamine hits, whatever, then I actually have like devoted time to let loose of my attention span. And it's so interesting to people, but that's one thing that I've consciously been trying to do more of this year as a way ultimately to get, I'm always seeking optimization, especially in work and in life, to become more productive. And in order for us to become more productive, we have to really understand where our time is going and how it's being used. And it's like it reverse engineered for me. I didn't realize how much time I was getting back into my life that I could focus on tasks, whether that's for work or for fun, by just down regulating this thing. It's completely blown my mind. And now because of that, I see it more in other people. It stands out to me more in people. And I see them on their phones more. I see them, and it's not even so much like, oh, I'm pissed you're on your phone. It's just, quit being a zombie to the technology. But it's really more so because it kind of reminds me of when I kind of found fitness, or like when a lot of people find fitness or they get that first dopamine rush or love for the first time. It's like, what could be. Yeah. What's on the other side. And so it's not so much just, I don't want you to be a zombie to the device. It's just, you don't know what you're missing out on in terms of life and productivity and being able to allocate more intentional time to things that probably matter more, right?
Yeah. So, a lot of people propose taking a digital detox. And I want to point out that that's a temporary fix.
Why is that?
Because the ship has sailed. We live in a
True,
world
yeah.
of technology.
Yeah.
And
She gone.
for any individual to pull out is very likely going to penalize that individual if you're interconnected with other people in some way, right? If you cut off, you've lost your line to your friends and your family and your loved ones. If you're a knowledge worker, you really get penalized because you're cutting yourself off from important information, from team members.
Fair enough, probably, yeah.
So, and also a digital detox, sure, it can help revive you. It can help you replenish. But you have to face the music and you have to kind of go back to your devices.
Yeah.
So I don't think that digital detoxes are, that's not the end all and be all solution. It's fine for, once in a while. But I actually think that there's other ways that we can achieve exactly the kinds of things you're aiming to do.
That's coming. Everybody hold your horses. We're going to get to that, the application portion.
Yeah.
But the last thing I want to touch on before we kind of dive into these three main components is, and it just escaped me. Oh my attention span went away. Oh my gosh. What we were talking about.
Your goal.
Oh, the goals.
Your goal to be more in more present in the environment without
This is so
your
ironic.
device.
Here I am not. I mean, I was so present in the moment I forgot.
Happens to all of us.
That's the problem being an interviewer is like I think of things and I have to hold in the back of my head. I'm like, pay attention, but think of this. Pay attention, but think of this. When you're wrapping up talking about a detox and then coming back. Would you say is that why maybe you don't recommend a digital detox to get better at mindlessly scrolling or to take back kind of your focus power is because like I was saying earlier, it's like we're separating ourselves from something that causes such a stimulus response, and a dopamine hit really. And so when we don't have it for a period of time, then we come back to it. Are we really just kind of setting ourselves up for failure because it's going to seem like even more of a hit of a dopamine response than before. So now it's just kind of like we're back hooked even more.
Yeah. If you don't fundamentally change, when you go back to your device, you're going to have exactly the same kind of behaviors. And I realize in a little bit we're going to talk about how you can fundamentally change. But if you can't do that, there's the environment is not changing, you're not changing. And you're going to pick up your devices and go back to the way things were.
It reminds me of, not to paint light of any significant health, behavior, addiction problem, but kind of like when we look at abstinence. When we look at abstinence of maybe alcohol or substances, or even somebody who is, I'm cutting off sugar, I'm cutting off ice cream, I'm cutting off any insert thing here that is in alignment for you personally and what you're out to like better your life with. What happens when you have that drink, when you have that scoop of ice cream? It's almost as if like that time before never happened, and it just comes back even harder. You want it even more, right?
Yeah,
it's hard to break that.
Like having that cigarette when you haven't had it for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would love to kind of dive into next these 4 myths that you talk about in the book. Can you break those down for us? What are the 4 myths when it comes to our attention span?
Right. So one myth is that there is this common narrative that we should be focused as long as we possibly can when we use our devices. And it sounds a little bit ironic because I'm talking about how much we're distracted, right? But it doesn't mean the pendulum should swing completely in the other direction. If people try to sustain focus for lengthy periods, it creates stress and it wears them down. We can't lift weights all day without stopping to replenish and relax. And so this idea of nonstop focus is just, it's not possible. You need to be able to step back and take a break.
Like we reach a point of diminishing return, basically, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I found, so in my research, I found that people's focused attention actually works in a rhythmic way. So there's certain times of the day when you're at your peak focus. There's other times when you're in a trough. There are individual differences, but we find on average that people tend to have their peaks at 11 a.m. and about 3 p.m. Now, if you're an early morning type, are you an early type?
I am, yeah.
Okay, I can imagine that, right? Being a fitness expert. If you're,
years of just having to wake up before the crack of dawn, dark 30, we called it in the military, is just kind of old habits die hard, really.
Yeah. So you might reach your peak attention much earlier, right? I'm a moderate person, so 11 a.m. is about right for me, and mid-afternoon. Someone who's a late type, there's a lot of software developers tend to start.
Oh, true
late
night owls,
and,
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
Nighttime coders, and
and so they may not reach their peak until much later. If I can mention an aside,
please,
which is a bit of a diversion, I'm currently doing research where we're looking at teams who do remote work. And we started doing this during the pandemic, right, to try to understand teamwork. And we find that when people were working at home in a team, they slipped into their natural chronotypes. And so
I was wondering if you're going to bring this up. Dr. Michael Bruce's work comes to mind. Have you heard of the book, The Power of When? All about chronotypes.
Oh, interesting.
Fascinating. I had him on the show years ago. I'll make sure to link the book for everybody.
Yeah.
Chronotypes is really interesting stuff when it comes to productivity.
Yeah. So it turns out that during the pandemic, without the 9 to 5 structure of, having to be in the office from, say, 9 to 5, people just naturally slipped into what was right for their chronotype.
Their natural rhythm.
And so that was a challenge for teamwork, right? Because there was less overlap. Someone who started their day at
if I'm productive at 11 a.m., emailing you for a task that day, but you're not productive until 3 or 4, we're going to be just like playing tag probably for a couple of days. Yeah.
Right. So there's that diversion. So we have these natural rhythms of when we're focused, and it's not surprising because we have rhythms in our hormonal system. There's rhythms in nature. I mean, our body responds to rhythm.
Our circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all even vary up to as much. I was reading, I think in Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep, I think as much as like 40 minutes in our circadian rhythm, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you think about biochemically where our bodies and minds are within any given window, it's even 40 minutes, that can mean a lot of difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the myth that people think, computing has extended our human capabilities so we can do more. Now that we have the technology, let's use it. But the human mind is ultimately still a bottleneck.
We haven't caught up to the technology.
We have not caught up with or maybe the flip side is that technology is not considering what human capabilities are. So it's not designed. And that goes back to my field of human-computer interaction, because my interest is in figuring out how technology can adapt to what human capabilities really are.
Second myth.
Okay, second myth is the idea that the kind of rote, mindless activity that we often do on our devices.
You mean the kind that I was crapping on everybody for earlier?
Yeah.
I'm no stranger to that as well.
That's really bad for you. And yes, if you get yourself into a rabbit hole, it can be bad. But we can use this kind of rote, mindless activity strategically. Now, what do I mean by rote, mindless activity? People have preferences for certain kind of silly games on the internet. Social media is rote. It's any kind of activity that involves very light engagement. So it's keeping your mind active, but in a very, very light way. And, some of the great artists, writers, scientists have used rote activity when they take breaks. The great writer and poet Maya Angelou, she used to do crossword puzzles. And so she would, write intensely, but then she would step back and she would do crossword puzzles. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein peeled potatoes and used to love peeling potatoes. That is as about rote activity as you can get, but you have to be somewhat engaged or you're going to cut your fingers. And he said he did his best thinking while he was peeling potatoes. So sometimes...
He was a poet, you said?
Ludwig Wittgenstein was a philosopher of the 20th century.
Okay, makes total sense.
Yeah.
I'm hearing it in my end. Maybe this is where you're going. I apologize if I'm getting ahead. She was doing a, quote, rote, am I saying correctly?
Rote,
excuse me.
R-O-T-E, yes.
I'm learning a new word every day. Doing a rote task. She was taking a break from her main task.
Yes.
But it was something that I think you could argue serves that task. She's a writer.
Yes.
She was writing, thinking, using words, letters. This philosopher, they're there to think and to ponder on the meaning of life and logic and reason and all these things, and that takes, you need to find the rhythm. And so I'm assuming in that kind of solace and that even meditative state, the rhythm of peeling a potato is exactly what he needs, where he needs to be to do his greatest thinking.
I mean, this kind of light engagement that, it keeps our minds active, but it's not overburdening us. It gives us a chance to replenish our mental resources. This can help ideas that, maybe are in the back burner of your mind. It can help bring them forward, help these ideas gel. And I know when I do tasks, for example, writing, if I just pull away, when things start to get too tiring for me, I need to step back. If I do something else and then I replenish and I come back to this writing, I can see it with fresh eyes. And things that I got really stuck on, I can come back and I'm re-energized. So again, this myth that stay away from social media and mindless activity, they can have a benefit, but you don't want to get stuck into a rabbit hole, and we can talk about that.
Oh, yeah. I think for me, it comes all down to intention.
Yeah.
If we have intention with everything we're doing, whether it's surface level seems dumb and mindless, such as like scrolling or just sitting on the couch doing nothing, compared to peeling potatoes, to doing a crossword puzzle, but then also take that same intention focus and put it to the work that we do. When we step into something, when we step into a task and we have an understanding of why we're here, what we're doing, and potentially even like the desired outcome, I think that's meaning. And it's okay to have the meaning be to take a chill pill, to take a relaxation sequence, and to allow yourself, your guard down a little bit, because we need the yin and the yang. We need the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. We need the go and the chill. So I think what I'm trying to say here is, if we just pause for a moment and go, I am choosing to pick up my phone. I am choosing to go on social media. I am choosing to check email. I am choosing to do this thing for this reason. I think there's a lot of power that we're taking back in what we're doing.
Yes.
And ultimately meaning. And meaning to accomplish a task, but meaning to have this downtime. It's both equally important.
Now, we found also in our research that people are happiest when they're doing this kind of rote activity.
I believe it.
They're much happier than when they're doing focused work. And the reason is because when you're doing focused work, you're stressed, right? You're using all your mental resources to, concentrate on something. You might feel more rewarded after doing focused activity. But like you said earlier, the rote activity is a necessary component. Now, of course, if you're able to take a break and walk outside, that's the best break of all.
That's my go-to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's absolutely
that's my
the
potato
best.
peeling.
But sometimes we need quick breaks, and sometimes it's just not possible. And maybe at the time that this show airs, people who are on the East Coast of the U.S. are experiencing very cold weather, and it may not
most
be
likely.
so easy to
absolutely.
just step outside like we can
Probably
here.
still even here in LA, but that's just me. I've lost all my cold weather tolerance now.
Yeah. So road activity can have benefits, right? But we have to learn how to use it strategically.
Love it. Love it. The third myth.
Third myth is the idea of flow. And, flow has everyone's talking about flow. And flow is really important. Absolutely it's important, but it's the hard reality is that it's pretty hard to find flow if you're a knowledge worker and you're on your computer all day. Now, before I studied psychology, I was an artist. And I got into flow very often. I know how to get into flow. I have, if I have start a painting, I could just get into flow very easily. If you're a dancer, if you play sports, if you have, if you're a skier.
Your athletes talk about flow probably the most. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the zone.
In the zone. Those are ways you can get into flow. But don't expect if you're on your device that you can readily get into flow unless you're playing a computer game like World of Warcraft and people get into flow. Some developers who are doing complex coding can get into flow. Maybe if you're composing music, you might get into flow. But the fact is it's pretty rare in the knowledge workplace. And so, let's be more realistic. And instead of thinking about, gee, how can I achieve flow? I'm a financial analyst. Let's think about your rhythm.
Ooh,
and
okay.
Let's think about rhythm as the new flow. Because if you can get in touch with really understanding your rhythm of when you're focused and when you're in your trough, you'll be much more effective at what you do. And you'll be happier as well.
I love that concept. It's as soon as you said it, it made perfect sense in my mind I think flow state is something that a lot of us have experienced and like you said, are after and are looking for ways, whether it's through cognitive task orientation or a hack, for me, like a supplement or something like that. But rhythm is so much more realistic.
Yes.
And it's so much more likely that we're going to be adherent to the tasks before us.
Yeah.
Like we've been talking about this whole time, it's like sometimes you're on, sometimes you're down. Sometimes you need to enforce the on and need to enforce the down. That's the rhythm. That's the back of the flow.
Yeah, it's much more attainable.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also want to point out that what flow is. Flow involves using your skill at an optimal level. So if you're watching a Netflix film, you might be very engaged in the film. That's not flow.
Right.
Flow is you have to be using your skill in an optimal way, like being a skier, right? And being on a challenging slope. If something is too hard for you, too challenging, you're not going to be in flow.
Surrendering to your comfortable couch and your big screen TV on a Netflix TV show is not flow state, everybody.
It's not flow.
You might be flowing through the shows and, crushing some seasons, but it actually made me think of, I made a note here about when you're talking about flow state. And I think you've kind of answered this, but I would love to ask you directly. Is, quote, flow state here, is this a matter of conquering multitasking or something else entirely? Are we missing the point when it comes to flow state? And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there with rhythm. How do you interpret that question? Is it really a matter of conquering multitasking or something else entirely?
Yeah, if you're in flow, you're not going to be switching your attention, right? Unless the activity you're doing involves I'm imagining a skier who's always scanning the environment, but in a sense that's not really switching attention because you're really
it's still the same task.
It's the same task. Right. You're just keeping an eye out for obstructions and looking at the course in front of you. So yeah, I think that's a good way to characterize it. It is very different than multitasking.
that skiing example makes me think, you said like a downhill skier could be, and most likely they are, especially like Olympic skiers, are in a flow state when they're coming down the mountain. But it's not just start at point A, get to point B. It's A, B, C, D, E, zigzag, zigzag. And you're interpreting all of this data actively and passively. What we can focus on is one thing, but what we are being bombarded with, in terms of external stimuli of light, sounds, colors, distractions, danger, potential, imminent threats. In your research, your personal opinion, is there any data? Is there a level of inputs that we can have, like a threshold before you can no longer technically be in flow state? Like, do we have a cap of stimuli of input, even though if it's the same task, to still be in flow state?
Oh, so I mean, if we exceed what we're capable of processing, we can't be in flow, right? There's an optimal point that we have to be at, this kind of sweet spot that that matches this level of skill, so that we can master it. We can master that skill, because if it's too much, then we're going to fail at it. We're going to be frustrated.
Yeah. How can we maybe test that? Are there any exercises we can do to test, all right, how much stimuli can I handle while being on this one task, to stay task oriented, and even to, as consciously as we can be aware of it? Because I think flow state, you kind of realize sometimes, usually after, like, the last hour I was just crushing it, before we can actually I'm out of flow state. Are there any tasks or exercises we can do to all right, 1 stimuli, 5 stimuli?
So, what's interesting about flow is you know it when you're in it, right? You can feel it. Flow, when you're in flow, you're completely unaware of the passage of time, right? Because you're so immersed in that thing of what you're doing. So, there are tasks you can do to, for multitasking. How well can you multitask?
I imagine it like a juggler, and someone throw an extra ball. Like, can you keep juggling before they all come crumbling down?
Yeah. So there's tasks that are analogous to that, where you're looking at letters being thrown at you on the screen, and you have to memorize something, and you have to match the task.
Yeah.
I don't know to what extent those can transfer over into real world behavior.
I wonder if I've never used one, but like we talked about earlier, one of those background applications on your computer, let's say. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but maybe you put that on, and it basically, like I said, toggles between how long are you on one screen, how long are you on one app or one browser or one tab, whatever. Maybe try, doing that, pull up something. Maybe I'll research something, put in the show notes for you guys. And then just, all right, let me add another tab, or let me, maybe map out your to-do list first, and then slowly just add it on, and then go back and look at the data to see, okay, maybe, you were good up until this point, like the 5th tab broke you, kind of thing.
So I'm always in favor of people self-experimenting and trying to understand their own patterns of behavior.
Absolutely.
So I think that's so very important to, whether it involves, journaling, what your activities are, writing down when you feel exhausted, understanding what breaks work best for you, the kinds of breaks, the kinds of rote activities that work best for you. I'm all in favor of doing that. Be your own scientist.
Oh, yeah. I always say, N equals 1. Well, for someone who hates statistics, I'm using a lot of stats references today, but be a study of 1. And when you do that, it never ceases to amaze me. I've been on my wellness journey, we'll call it, for 17 years now. I really kind of had this light switch go off in my mind when I was about 19, 20 years old of, I'm really in control more than I ever thought of this human experience, and just getting baselines of things, whether that was a food log, a workout log, or just being mindful of reflecting on what I did in the day to try to do it better the next time. Or in that experience, that self-reflective experience, I would realize, in a little bit of a flow state, I would even say, I had no idea that I even did this, or I did this thing for that long, or why did I do this? And it just kind of in the background would cause these small changes in my life because I was bringing it to the top of my attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of just unraveling this now. It's
This
really
is great.
interesting. Yeah. That's why I love
wonderful.
talking to experts like this. So the fourth myth, how can we kind of wrap this up?
Yeah. So there's also a common perception that the reason we're so distracted when we use our devices is due to the notifications that we get and to our own lack of willpower. Now, I'm not disputing that, right?
I think more so the latter. I think more
okay, those two things, yes, they do explain some distractions, but that's not the full picture. That's just one tiny part of the whole story. And, yes, you can do hacks like turn off your notifications, but of course we still self-interrupt. But I take what's called a socio-technical perspective. And let me explain what I mean by that. It's hard to understand humans without understanding what their environment is. And there's my favorite psychologist, Kurt Lewin, who's known as the founder of social psychology, talks about how people exist in what's called a life space. And that means to really understand how we act as humans, you also have to understand the effect of the context in which a person is, right? And the context, it's so many things, right? And, we're in the digital age, right? And our relationship with our devices it's affected by so many things beyond just our willpower and notifications. So let me throw out a couple of them.
Please.
So one of them is the design of the internet itself, right? So, the node and link structure of the internet maps on so well to the theory of semantic network theory in our minds.
Are you familiar with Nir Eyal and his work? He wrote Hooked and Indistractable.
Yeah.
Again, I'll have that link for you guys in the show notes. Another former guest on the show, but Hooked, especially, exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, the idea is that we tend to think in terms of associations, right? So, if you were to say cat, I would say mouse, right? And that's just the way our memory is. The theory of how our memory is structured. Now, let me back up a little bit and give a little bit of history about the design of the internet and how it came about. So, information, before the internet, before computing, we had information stored in libraries in a hierarchy, the Dewey Decimal System. If you've ever, any of you out there who've been to a physical...
Flashback to like kindergarten or first grade when we got the library tour. And here's the Dewey Decimal System, little punch cards.
Right. And so along comes a scientist, Vannevar Bush, who very famous. He started the National Science Foundation, among other things. He decided this can't be right because people don't think this way. People don't think in terms of hierarchies. And if a person really wants to find information, we have to structure information by associations, right? That's how humans think, and it'll be easier for people to find information. And so he designed a device, and it was actually just a conceptual device. It was never built. And it was called the MEMIX, but it's very famous in the history of computer science, very famous, the MEMIX, because it was the idea for this, for information to be structured in terms of associations. When you go on Wikipedia, right, and you're, reading a Wikipedia page about, let's say LA, right? And all of a sudden you're reading, and then you read about LACMA, Los Angeles County Museum of Art. oh, you click on that, and then that leads you to clicking on other links. Your mind is making associations, and you see these links, and they just map on so well to how your mind is associated, and we're primed. We're cognitively primed to respond to these links because we've been primed in our mind.
Makes total sense. Yeah.
And so that's why we can just, joyride through the internet because it just works so well with how our minds are structured. It's
so true. I mean, if we think about it for a second, why do we succumb so easily, most of us, to being pulled in to these platforms, to these devices, to these screens? It's not out of just a fluke. It's by design, by people who are very aware of what you were just talking about and then engineering these things to keep us on there.
Yeah. So another reason that's beyond notifications and our lack of willpower for why we're so distracted and we have all these problems with using our devices is that, we're social beings. And our social natures lead us to behave in certain ways when we use our devices. There's this concept in psychology that's called social capital. And it means that when we have relationships with other people, we trade resources. So I'm going to do you a favor because I expect you're going to do me a favor, right? And the internet is just a marketplace of social capital. I'm going to answer your email because someday I want you to answer mine. Or I'm going to answer this email because maybe there's going to be a job offer there. And so it's a lot of what attracts us to doing electronic communications is trading in this social capital.
The human experience is nothing if fundamentally a marketplace.
Yes.
Really. I mean, at its core.
That.
Yeah.
I like that. So we're social beings and we respond to power. We respond to social influence and, peer pressure, and our identities are all wrapped up. We want to maintain identity on the internet. So that's also a reason why we're so, tethered to the internet. And let me just give one other example.
Please.
And again, these go far beyond just notifications and our lack of willpower. And this is a very provocative idea. Okay, I admit it, but I'm very intrigued by it. So I discovered that shot lengths of TV and film have decreased in length over time.
Oh.
And they've decreased
Totally believe it.
to an average of 4 seconds. Now
That's a TikTok. That's a TikTok video.
Yeah. So when TV and film first started out, shot lengths were much longer, but they've decreased over the years. Now, there's this fundamental principle in science that correlation does not imply causality. And I'm not going to make a claim that shot lengths influenced our attention spans on our devices.
Right. A correlation does not equal causation, meaning just
Right.
because something happened doesn't mean what originated gave into the end result, basically.
Exactly.
Or caused the end result.
Exactly. So we can't make that claim, but it's an interesting trend to look at it, and we don't know what's causing what. But
I know TikTok caused everything. That's the whole reason. I'm convinced of it. Yeah.
I mean, it could just be a reflection of our times, and it's a reflection of the state of our attention. And it could very well be that directors and editors are influenced by their own short attention span. So when they're creating TV and film, maybe they're creating the shot lengths and organizing the scenes in such a way that it maps onto their own attention spans. But I'm just bringing this up as an intriguing idea. It's something that I've thought about a lot, and I'm very, very interested in it. And to really figure out what's causing what. You'd have to design a study.
Oh.
Right? But we do know.
A longitudinal study,
Yeah.
most likely.
We do know certain things. For example, there have been studies with kids, and when very small children, like 4 years old, when they're watching, they give them fast-paced videos to watch. And so we have one group of kids who's watching fast-paced videos. Another group of kids are drawing, or slow-paced videos, so doing something else. And then after, they're given a task. And the kids who've watched these fast-paced videos have a much harder time paying attention.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So there's a mechanism in the brain. It's called executive function. And it's just gotten worn out. And for little kids, their executive function is just not well developed to begin with.
Most adults I
Right.
know it's not developed that well either.
Yeah. And so it's just worn out. And so that's an interesting, a study. Potentially, it could argue for the idea that, there is this relationship between short shot lengths on film and TV and our attention spans. And I will say one more thing, that Americans are on some screen on average 10 hours a day. So on average, about
Say that again, please.
10 hours a day, we are on some kind of screen.
Wow.
And the screen could be your computer, your phone, could be watching TV, could be watching film, but it's an average.
Wow.
And I think the average for Americans is about 5 hours a day on our computers or phones. So, I keep thinking there's got to be some kind of relationship. It still needs to be investigated, right? But I absolutely think it's worthy of doing a study to try to figure that out.
I'm with you, and I would love to support that in some way. And let me give you a little personal example, a professional example. So I'm a content creator. I'm a podcaster. This is what I do. I live predominantly in the long format content space. And somebody's going to see this podcast and they're going to look at the length, and right away they're going to give us their most precious commodity, and that's their time. This is going to be probably about an hour or so. So right away they're choosing to give us an hour. But even after that choice, and I know this from looking at years now of data and analytics of my show and podcasting in general, and then like I said earlier, just then comparing to short format platforms such as TikTok and what's sticking, what's trending, what's actually surviving and thriving. I so much so now have become aware of the fight for attention span in what I do professionally, that it has influenced, I don't know if this is right or wrong, or if I even am fully aware of it to the fullest extent, but it has influenced how I operate as a long format content creator, because I now not only am doing all of my homework and research and being present with you and my guest and repeating things back and asking questions, but I'm also thinking, what's a good clip? What's a clip? What's a clip? What's a question that can be a clip? Can what you just said, can I turn that into a 4 to 15 second clip? And so it's like the chicken or the egg kind of thing. We are going to these shorter format ways to keep our attention because that's where we are evolutionarily? Is that where we are as humans? Or is that just what content and the world and all these screens has kind of created, and therefore we're being kind of forced into it?
That's exactly the question that I'm trying to ask in looking at film and TV and our screens. Advertising also. Advertising used to be much longer, like television advertising. When it first started out, 60 seconds was, of course, Super Bowl ads are 60 seconds. But now ads are, condensed. They find that a 15-second ad can perform as well as a 30-second ad.
It's got more of a fighting chance of somebody actually sticking around for that long.
Yeah. And there are, I was looking at patents. There was one patent that shows how you can condense, remove frames from a short commercial and condense it down even further without losing the meaning or the content.
I've seen that in so many forms of content now. There's so many more cuts, even just milliseconds of where maybe it would just be that minor little dead space that I just said, but that would be
Yeah.
cut out just to keep the like choppiness, to like keep our eyes and ears glued.
And we see that in YouTube.
Mm-hmm,
So jump cuts, right? What is an aesthetic in YouTube. So jump cuts originated in film in the French New Wave in the 1950s, Jean-Luc Godard. And, a jump cut would cut out a portion of the film. And, it might be in the movie Breathless, the main character is reaching to the glove compartment. And all of a sudden there's a jump cut, big cut, and all of a sudden he has a gun in his hand, right? So that's an example of you're cutting out what's
A part of the journey.
part of the journey. And you see that on YouTube a lot. And also what's happening on YouTube is that natural speech utterances are being cut. So
Yep.
things like, oh, it's what makes us human, right? This is the kind of speech, it acts as a transition,
Like
right?
technically they might be our filler words, but
Exactly.
it's the most real part of conversation.
But it communicates something to your partner. It's communicating that you're listening or that you're thinking of something or that you agree or disagree. So these filler words are important, and those are being cut out of YouTube. And so we're seeing this trend in a lot of different media.
Speaking of YouTube, I had 'cause we put these up on YouTube. The video, this will be on YouTube. Subscribe, and I've gone through quite a few different analysis, on my own, and some friends that do well on YouTube, and they're like, "Oh yeah, here's the formula. You got to have the first 7 seconds be able to keep people for the first 30 seconds, and the first 30 seconds has to be a hook enough for people for the first 2 minutes, and then if you can get them for the first 2 minutes, that's what triggers the algorithm. That's what's going to keep." I'm like, but what if I just made a good interview? What if I just put out a good video? It's just, I struggle with this, and I know I'm not alone. Other long format creators. It's just, why I feel like I don't have to fight. Why should I have to fight for someone's attention when I tell you, and with the track record, this is valuable information. And it's just like I'm fighting. I don't know if this losing battle with people's attention span or my own, but you got to basically, as a creator, we have to play the game.
Yes,
We have to play the game, no
absolutely.
matter if we're creating a 4-second video or a 4-hour podcast.
Yeah.
The length doesn't seem to matter. We have to find a way to package it that is going to work for people's attention span.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's such a difficult battle.
But it's also inadvertently reinforcing the short attention spans. I fear that we're losing the art of conversation, which is more relaxed. It uses these filler words. We need the space and the time to have these kinds of conversations.
Like this one right here, right now. Well, I definitely could go much longer with you. This has been fantastic so far. Thank you so much for your time. But I want to be mindful of your time and everybody here, if they're still listening. This has been a great, lengthier episode. I want to get to the final section of the core of your work, and that's the focus, rhythm, and balance, and really kind of these applications, these tactics to kind of get out of it. So you've helped us understand where and how and potentially why we are losing our attention, and the science and the real world experience around that. So what can we do about it?
Yeah. So I'm very much influenced by the work of Albert Bandura. He's a social psychologist who's specialized in how people can develop agency. And agency means, having the power to control your behavior. And I really think that if people can have agency over their behavior with their devices, and of course agency in their lives and agency over your attention, we don't have to depend on things like a digital detox or these hacks,
It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's something that's becomes part of us, and then you have power to be able to act in the way you want. So, the first stage of achieving agency is called intentionality. So it means making your unconscious behaviors more conscious, bringing it to your conscious awareness. And so during the pandemic, my university offered a course in mindfulness meditation, so mindfulness-based stress reduction, which was a great course.
Especially during that time period.
Yes.
Still very important.
Yeah, it was really great. And then it occurred to me that I can apply some of the ideas of mindfulness to helping make our behaviors, bringing them to a conscious awareness. So I recommend what I call meta-awareness, which is being aware of what you're doing as it's unfolding. Right? When you do mindfulness, you focus on your breath, right? That keeps you in the present. When you're doing meta-awareness, you're staying in the present of what you're doing. Now, I do research for a living. I'm a professional observer of human behavior. And meta-awareness...
I think I am too a little bit.
You are.
And then I find them and I bring them on the show.
You are. And, meta-awareness is about being a professional observer of yourself. And you do that by asking yourself questions and, keeping yourself on track to stay conscious of what you're doing. So whenever I get an urge to check the news or I get an urge to go on social media, I ask myself, do I need to do it? Do I need to go there now?
Do I know why?
And do I know why? Yeah. And you ask it, you probe yourself, and that keeps you on track for what you're doing. And, if you say, yeah, I need a break, I'm just spent. And so you go to social media or, I go to one of my favorite mindless games, but then I have to keep myself in the present and say, okay, am I done now? Do I feel replenished?
It's radical honesty.
It is.
Radical self-honesty.
Yeah. And if I'm reading a news story, let's say, I'll start reading it and am I still getting value? Have I learned the gist of this? If I have, let's get back on track. So meta-awareness is a part of achieving intentionality. Another part of achieving agency is self-regulation. So, and there's a lot of things that that you can do to help self-regulate. So one of the things you can do is you can design your day in a way that makes it easier for you to self-regulate.
Yeah.
And then we go back to the idea of rhythm. Knowing when your peak rhythm is. Design your days so that your hardest task or the task that requires your most creative work is done at your peak times. And don't waste those times doing email or doing something else. Yeah. Those are precious times and make the most of it.
You carve them out for a reason.
Yes.
Or this is the wake-up call to have the awareness to get your baseline so you can then create the times and protocols. The fundamentals of like time blocking here we're talking about. Yeah. It all feeds back.
Yeah. And that these periods of time are not going to last very long. So really, use them very efficiently. But also another thing to keep in mind is that every task we do, every activity we do has a certain emotional quality associated with it. There are some things I do that make me happy. I like writing, so that makes me happy. There are certain meetings I have with people that makes me happy. There's other things that don't make me happy. I hate doing bureaucratic stuff. I hate it. But you can design your day in such a way that you balance out your tasks in terms of their emotional qualities. It's called emotional valence, right? The type of emotion that the task elicits. And so plan your day very carefully. You don't want to do, one task after another that is going to not make you very happy and it's going to just wear you down. If you've got a hard task or something that's unpleasant, then plan it before a break, right? And make sure you take enough time to replenish. We live in Southern California, so I go out and exercise. that's for me an ideal kind of break to take, to just, step away, replenish, reset.
The term again,
Meta-awareness.
Meta-awareness.
Yes.
I think that is the best way to describe, unbeknownst to me, what I was sharing earlier about how this year I've kind of had this switch flip on my awareness and tether to my devices, and just how I'm being sucked into, whether I'm being sucked into or I'm choosing to let go into screens or whatever the pastime might be. And one little hack for me as you're describing this made me think about, I'm doing it. This self-agency practice of keeping my attention span is first and foremost in anything we want to change in our life. It's first becoming aware of it, right? So it's first choosing awareness. Like, I want to become more aware of when I am slipping. And for me, that's like when I find myself on my phone out of my schedule or something that's like, I don't need to be doing this right now. And so what I do is, if I'm just on my phone after having this choice of awareness, and all of a sudden I catch myself, I'm like, oh, I'm on my phone. Oh, I'm scrolling email or social media or whatever. And in that moment, in that catch, if I know why, then I allow myself to continue. If it was, because I need to look up this person, or if I have to message this person or whatever, if I can immediately come up with my why and not just a bullshit why, or if I have to go, wait, how did I get here? How did I get on my couch, or how am I, on the bed or on the floor on the phone? If that happens, what I do is, I wouldn't say punish myself, but I go, okay, maybe my self-control is not where I want it to be today. I will go put my phone in another room.
Great.
So if I can first go awareness and then disrupt that pattern, for me, it's been a total game changer to keep my attention so I can go back to the task even quicker.
Yeah.
And then it kind of gives me this positive feedback of, I made a choice, I made a promise to myself, I kept it. I'm then therefore being more productive in my day and the task that I said I was going to do when I was going to say I was going to do it. And then I have a greater reward later. Then cool. I'm done with that task. Let me chill. Let me go grab my phone. It's like I have these kind of delegated buckets in my life and literally in my house now, where I know where I'm doing, what I'm doing, and why.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. You can change your environment, right? I mean, it's like if you're, imagine you're at a buffet and you go up to the dessert table.
Sounds about right for me. Yeah.
And you see that piece of, cheesecake or chocolate cake. First of all, don't go to the buffet table and don't put that on your plate because there's no way you're not going to be able to eat it. When you have your phone right next to you, there's no way you're not going to respond when you hear that text chime. You don't even need to
even just
text
the screen
chime.
up. How many of us
just having the screen up?
Yeah, that's why flipping it over, or even for me, I turn off majority of the time. I put my phone in focus or do not disturb. And therefore, the only notification it will allow through are the people I've selected. And that's my wife, my mom, my family, basically, or one of my main one or two coworkers. Because if they really need to get through to me, then it's for an important reason.
Yeah.
But sometimes even that isn't enough. And that's the reason why I kind of do that practice of phone in the kitchen. I go back into the office and do my thing.
Another room.
Yeah.
Put it, in other words, create friction. Create as much friction as you can. Right, you're creating speed bumps to make it harder to get to it. If your
intentional speed bumps,
if your phone's in another room, you're probably not going to walk over to it.
Because then let's be honest, if we're sitting there aimlessly scrolling, we're probably being a little bit lazy. And then if we know our phone is in another room, I mean, how many times does a remote fall off the couch now, and we're like, guess I'll just watch this channel for the next 30 minutes. We're becoming more lazy, which is a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. So another aspect of agency is course correction, right? To realize that you're going down a wrong path and you need to course correct. So, we can think about that with social media. So many of us have just, accepted all these friends to the party for social media. But, maybe you can do some house cleaning. And, I gave a course to my students and we talked about this. And then the next class session, one of my students said, I did house cleaning and I got rid of a lot of my friends.
And I have a lot of dirty laundry.
I'm not recommending you to unfriend people or kick them out of your network. If you do, that's your decision.
Mute's good too.
Mute is good too. But we can think about how to strategically use social media. Because, when you think about it, social media can bring benefits.
Absolutely.
And let's think about how we can tap into those benefits. So it's a way to, it's easier to connect and coordinate with people through social media than, picking up a phone. It's faster. But then once you connect with them, then find some other way to have a meaningful conversation with them.
Let that be a stepping stone,
exactly.
Not just the only method. Am I hearing correctly? Yeah.
Yeah. So, social media can provide other kinds of resources. If you want to know where to go on vacations, you throw this message out to everyone in your friend network and you get all kinds of suggestions. That's fine. That's a way to strategically use it. Mm-hmm. But simply scrolling endlessly through it is probably not going to provide you with a lot of benefits.
Yeah.
And this is where meta-awareness can come in. And you can keep asking yourself, am I really getting value out of being here? Maybe you'll get more value if you just think of one person in your network and think about connecting with that person and telling that person, we haven't talked for a long time. And I just want to say it would be great to catch up.
Let's put the social back in social media, right? I can't take credit for this. I heard this amazing analogy a couple months ago, and it's where many people, the first thing we do when we wake up is we roll over, grab our phone, and we just check, whether that's work, weather, social media, whatever, but especially going the social media or even email route. It's as if we wake up and within the first 60 seconds of being awake, we allow hundreds, thousands of people potentially into our bedroom.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second. If you woke up and all of a sudden there's 500 people storming your house in your bedroom, that would be overwhelming. But yet we're choosing to do that in a more concise way here on the phone. It's the same level of stimuli. We're seeing things, reading things, hearing things, good news, bad news, shitty weather, great weather, a bombing in this city, a emotional, heartfelt story over here, but it's all information and we're opening ourselves up to it in a way that I think we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, is it meaningful?
Right.
Is this really meaningful?
And if it is, great, but can you answer that honestly? Yeah,
is it improving our lives?
Yeah.
Am I learning anything from this?
Well, I have to force myself to stop talking to you right now because this has been so educational and informative and fun. So thank you so much. I'm going to make sure to have all of your work and the book and everything listed down in the show notes and video notes for people. But I want to get to my final question for you. Same question I ask every guest at the last part of the show. Hopefully this has been informational and educational for the listener, for the viewer. And I say to help us live a life ever forward. A tactic, a knowledge nugget, something that we can chew on, mull over, or hopefully immediately go apply into our lives to help us take a next step in life.
Oh, wow.
So ever forward, when you hear those two words, what does that mean to you?
To me, it means never stop learning and never stop being open-minded. So, the only way to really stay young is to keep learning and just keep learning as much as you can and being open. There's always something new that you can learn. And, this is really how I operate. Maybe that's how I got into academia. But I love to learn, and I couldn't imagine not continually learning something new.
I echo that 100%. It's the whole reason why I'm here doing what I'm doing today. I was sharing with you earlier my history. I started the show as a way to serve my career at that time because I wanted just to keep learning what are the best fitness, nutrition, wellness, mindset, hacks, science, anecdotal evidence, clinical evidence. And I was just constantly learning, and I would immediately go then apply it to my clinic, and I would help people, or at least have a new resource where they could help themselves. Constantly seeking new information, or just inventory and maintenance of that information can often propel you forward as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much. This was great.
It's been a lot of fun for
Good.
me.
I'm glad. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gloria Mark. I'm a professor at University of California, Irvine. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about our attention spans with our devices when we use our computers and phones. And we're going to be talking about the science of multitasking, interruptions, distractions, why we experience these things, and what we can do about it.
That's the one. Yeah.